Hi, my name is Trevor Kling. I'm a GMAT tutor. I scored 47B on my own GMAT, and I've tutored a lot of people. You can find me online at trevorkleetutor.com. So this is my strategy for reading comprehension, specifically for main point questions on really tricky passages. I find a lot of my students have a lot of trouble with these types of passages, um, and with these types of questions in specific. So I want to talk about how I approach these. So there's a few different things that I focus on here. One is when I do main point, I'm always looking for like what's the thesis or what's the topic sentences of the paragraph. So I usually look at the first sentence for the topic sentence of each paragraph, and then I'll do the last sentence to confirm. And then for these trickier ones, something that I focus on a lot is point of view. So when I'm doing the first sentence, last sentence, I think, what does the author believe? What do the people mentioned in the passage believe, or the characters in the passage believe? What's the author's view of the people in the passage? Does he agree with them? Does he disagree with them? And then the last thing I look for is unfamiliar terms. If there's anything in the first sentence or two that I don't know, especially if it comes up a bunch of times, it's probably going to be a really important term for the passage. So I make sure I understand the definition. So these are really the only three things that I think about for these tricky main point sort of questions. And then I find the rest of it comes pretty easily. And so when I teach my students these, um, they're usually surprised with how easy it is to get these questions right once you're okay with these three things. So let's see this in action. Um, so here's a passage from the GMAT. It's from the official guide, and it's a tricky reading comprehension passage. It's a short one, but it's tricky, and a lot of people have trouble with it. So let's go through it. So we're starting off with first sentence, last sentence. So first sentence, Antonio Castaneda has utilized scholarships from women's studies. Let's do that. From women's studies and Mexican American history to examine 19th century literary portrayals of Mexican women. Last sentence, Castaneda finds that during the same period that saw non-Hispanic women being economically displaced by industrialization, Hispanic law, economic position of Californianas, All right. So we introduce Castaneda. He's one of our characters who's utilized scholarships from women's studies in Mexican American history to examine 19th century literary portrayals of Mexican women. And we say Castaneda finds this thing about like non-Hispanic women and the Californianas, the Mexican women of the territory. Second paragraph. For Castaneda, the laws explain a stereotypical plot created primarily by non-Hispanic novelists. Story of an ambitious non-Hispanic merchant or trader desirous of marrying an elite Californiana. And then we get, because of their real-life economic significance, the Californias were portrayed more favorably than were others of the same nationality. So, in the second one, Castaneda says this explains a stereotypical plot in these novels, which is marrying a Californiana, which, as we know, unfamiliar term, right? Unfamiliar term. Mexican women of the territory, the Californiana. And then we get the explanation for this. So we really only have one person's point of view here, is Castaneda. We know the author never really questions Castaneda. He never really says like, oh, Castaneda might be mistaken or there's something Castaneda that should have thought about. He just sort of reports what Castaneda thinks, which is about this 19th century literary portrayals of Mexican women, specifically the Californianas, and the Californianas in relation to like a plot by these novelists. So if we go to the question now, we get the primary purpose of the passage is to. So here are options. Trace historical influence on depiction of Mexican Americans? No, it's not about depiction of Mexican Americans in general. It's this very specific Mexican women, like novelist thing. Explain how research in history has been affected by scholarship in women's studies. Way too general, right? It's not research in history in general, right? It's specifically this, Californiana thing. Describe the historical origins of a literary stereotype. Yeah, exactly. Historical origins is our first paragraph. Literary stereotype is our second paragraph. Done. Describe ways in which minority writers have sought to critique a dominant culture through their writing. No, there's nothing about critiquing dominant culture. It's nothing about ways. Yeah. And then finally, evaluate both sides in a scholarly debate about a prominent literary stereotype. No, there's no both sides. We really just report what Castaneda says. So that's why C is the correct answer. I put a little check mark there. So this is in a short passage. Let's take a look at a longer passage. This is a science passage. So I'll start with this one here, right? Science passage. So there are recent reports of apparently drastic declines in amphibian populations and of extinctions of a number of the world's endangered amphibian species. These declines, if real, may be signs of a general trend toward extinction. Da 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 da. All right. So I don't want to read this whole paragraph, even though it's 2 sentences. It's just long 2 sentences. So here we get much more of the author's point of view. So here we're talking about amphibian populations and extinctions, but look at the author's terms here. Apparently, if real, right? So now when we see here, many environmentalists have claimed that, we already get the author, we get the environmentalist point of view, which is that their amphibian populations in decline, but we get the author saying, well, maybe. So let's look at the second paragraph. To evaluate these claims, it's useful to make a preliminary distinction that's too often ignored. And here we get the probability of extinction due to such random factors depends on the population size and independent of the prevailing direction of change in that size. So here we start off with, the author said in the first paragraph, maybe there's these declines. And here it says, well, let's think about it. Here's what we would have to do to think about it. Here we get, for biologists, population declines are potentially more worrisome than extinctions. Okay. Here we get, anecdotal reports of population decreases cannot distinguish among these possibilities, and some amphibian populations have shown strong fluctuations in the past. So here we're getting like the idea of like decrease versus extinction, right? Fluctuations, all of these things are related to trying to evaluate like, is there a decline? Is there an extinction? Maybe, right? Same thing in the first paragraph. Last, we've got, it is indisputably true that there's simply not enough long-term scientific data on amphibian populations to enable researchers to identify real declines in amphibian populations. Unfortunately, long-term data will not soon be forthcoming, and postponing environmental action while we wait for it may doom species and whole ecosystems to extinction. So this is actually an interesting ending. So this entire time he's been like, maybe, maybe not. It's hard to evaluate. We need more data. And then he concludes with actually, but we need to do stuff now. So that's our conclusion. So now let's look at the primary purpose of the passage. Okay. Assess the validity of a certain view. That actually seems pretty solid, right? Like the whole thing we're talking about, oh, is there a decline? Is there not a decline? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And meanwhile, here he just starts off with like, okay, like, yeah, let's assess the validity of it. Is it real? So yeah, that seems pretty good. Distinguish between two phenomena? No. So we're not trying to distinguish between them, right? Distinguishing, trying to say, oh, this is how this is different from this one. No, we're trying to say, like, are these real extinctions? Identify the causes of a problem. Again, we're missing the point of like, it's not identifying the causes, we're not even sure the problem exists. So no, not that one. Describe a disturbing trend. No, right? It's very much like assessing the validity. Does it exist? Does it not exist? And then allay concern about particular phenomenon, that's way off. So allay means like to allay concern, you make people feel better about it, not so worried about it. And that's not what's going on here at all, right? He's trying to evaluate it, And then at the end, he even says, well, you know, maybe this is real, maybe this isn't real, but we need to take action now. So like that wouldn't be a good way of allaying concern if you end with like take action now. So that's why A is the correct answer. So, and again, like if you go back to the original three things here, we did first sentence, last sentence, and then we just figured out the author's point of view, right? We didn't have any unfamiliar terms, unlike the last one, but the author's point of view was super important here. You know, we know he wasn't just taking what the environmentalist said at face value. All right, cool. So that's how I do these tricky main point passages. If you want a lot more practice with this, including like fully explained passages, original questions, you should check out my ebook on reading comprehension, which you can find at gumroad.com/Trevor Klee. You can also keep an eye out on this YouTube channel because I'll be uploading some more videos soon. All right, thank you very much.